Welcome back, everybody, into Bill's Chat. I am Josh McCarty. With me, as always, is Luca. Luca, how are you doing?
I'm doing all right. We're knees deep in the off season already. It feels like. I mean, soon enough it'll be the new season calendar when it comes to football terms. But it's now being a few weeks removed from any Bills football, and we approach. Although if you're listening, you already know the Super Bowl result. We are recording this ahead of time, just full transparency. We're in the Super Bowl weekend here. It's it's a little bittersweet, but at the same time, I will say I find myself much more accepting to this time of year than I thought I would be after a loss, or as it has been, say after the 13 seconds season and what that felt like the next couple weeks, and even avoiding football altogether. I'm doing good. I feel good and stuff, and I'm honestly ready to put kind of a bow on this season as a whole, and move on with looking forward to the 26th season that will be here quicker than we realize it.
It really will. And because the Bills make these deep playoff runs, the combine ends up being right around the corner, right after we're done with our wrap up show. So, what we're going to do on this show is we really are going to put a bow on this 2025/2026 season. And if you listen to our normal post game shows, then a lot of this will be very familiar. We're going to do a season long version of game ball and game check, but then we're also going to add some other awards in there: Rookie of the Year, Most Improved Player, Game of the Year, Unsung Hero, and then Luca came up with an idea that I really like: headline for the season. And that is really essentially, if 2021 was 13 seconds, what's if you were going to 10 years from now say, hey, remember that Bill season? And your friend's like, which one? What 2, 3, 4 word phrase would you use? And they'd be like, I remember that one. So we'll get to that in a little bit. But Luca, this season was a wild ride. It started off feeling like that the Bills were going to coast to the 1 seed. Patriots lost a couple games early at home to the Steelers and the Raiders. And then the Bills started taking their lumps. It felt like they could never get a fully healthy roster. The season saw the Bills complete 3 successful hook and ladders in games that they lost all 3 of them. Just just a season that I think was fun, was frustrating, and ultimately led to significant change for our Buffalo Bills. But we're going to get into all that tonight, probably as we're talking through these awards. Let's start with they're all positive except for game check, but let's go with most improved.
Ooh.
And this is one Luca and I did. I showed Luca my answers ahead of time. If we agreed, we're just going to announce the winner. If we disagree, then we're going to both make our case. But for me, Luca, the most improved player, I think, was a fairly easy one, because last year we saw this guy come in, looked a little overwhelmed at times, had to play some in the AFC Championship game, and really looked like a fish out of water. And then in year 2, he took a leap, and then he took a significant leap when his compadre Jordan Poyer came in the lineup and really became one of the stalwarts on this defense going forward. If you haven't guessed by now, we're talking about the sophomore out of Utah, Cole Bishop. Luca is our most improved player.
What I love about this being so what you call it, deserving and so apparent to pretty much anyone that followed along all season is this is something that even stems going into training camp opening up and the discussions that were had. One of the key things being circled going into the early stages of the 25 regular season was: who is going to stand out at safety? What do they do with the safety position? Who can we trust? The defensive back core as a whole. What is it all going to look like? And there were so many more questions than what it felt like answers. And what the conversation was going into the actual games that mattered were, well, you have Christian Benford at least, but then even after a Max Hairston injury, you have question marks elsewhere. It opened up the season with Cole Bishop and Taylor Rapp as your safety duo. And then you had Trey White on the boundary. And on the early go of it, Taylor Rapp and Trey White were cringe-worthy play level that it felt it felt like it was even something that was bringing down a Christian Benford. But one of those guys was kind of rising to the occasion a little bit and showing why he was a day 2 pick like he was, and why, a lot of people in that building had a lot of faith and trust in him as a player for the future, and what they saw in the athleticism and everything like that, that as long as he can wrap his brain about what is required from the position, he will be able to take off and be a great player for this team. And that's exactly what he was. And even in that early stretch when the secondary was kind of getting chewed apart, he was still making plays. You can highlight even something like the Saints, where we still kind of went away from that game going, is this defense really even capable of doing anything of sorts? Cole Bishop stepped up and made a play in that game. There are other moments throughout the entirety of the season where Cole Bishop made an incredibly significant play to either seal it or just change it on its head or take control of it. And what I love about it all with Cole Bishop is, even when you look at the final game of the season being the Denver game where we came up short, there's not one thing that really stands out to me though on why Cole Bishop may have been the cause of some issues in that game. And then the previous game to that, he was the man who got the interception to seal the deal. And he was also a very impact player in that Jags game on the road to get, this air quote, if you're not watching, elusive playoff win on the road for the Bills, and Josh Allen, leading the way. So Cole Bishop being the most improved is an absolute runaway for these kind of wrap up awards here. It just, not one other individual on this roster could you even say remotely came close to elevating their game and just becoming such an impact player. I mean, Cole Bishop is probably now already, Josh, I would say with all the new changes coming to coaching, I would say Cole Bishop's viewed as one of the top 10, 12 when it comes to focused players on this roster. Like, you even saw the new defensive coordinator come in and talk about how much he likes Cole Bishop and he looks forward to utilizing Cole Bishop and what he can do in his system and what he's gonna try to achieve as the DC. There's a reason for it, and it's because he stood out on the tape to all teams around the league, and Cole Bishop absolutely showed that he's going to be someone, hopefully, for this team for years and years to come, that you can depend on back there in the secondary.
He led the team in interceptions with 4 in the regular season, the one game-sealing one that Luka mentioned in the playoffs. Timely interceptions, too, obviously sealing the game in the playoffs. First drive against Miami with a chance for the Bills to really, put their stamp on that game that didn't go their way. A game-saving interception in a lot of ways against the Saints, and a game-turning interception where he got a lot of credit from Baker Mayfield against the Bucs. He also had 2 sacks on the season, led the team all defensive players in total snaps, and also had 2 sacks, and he led the team in interceptions, and just an all-around dynamic player for these Bills. And my favorite thing about Cole Bishop this season, Luka, is he not only had the consistency, but he had the splash plays. Yeah. And if you can bring both of those to the table, that's where you get a chance to have a superstar player. I think Terrell Bernard excels at the splash plays. The consistency drives me crazy. I think Jordan Phillips, through a lot of his Bills career, excelled at the splash plays. But oh boy, the consistency would drive you insane. Cole Bishop right now, at least how he played in 2025, had both. Very deserving for our most improved player. Luka, let's go to game of the year. And I think there's several games here that really stand out to folks. Obviously, the opener against the Ravens was just an electric ride. The game here against the Bengals, where Christian Benford has the amazing pick 6. And then on the next play, AJ Epinesa gets an interception, and they turn that game around. The big second half comeback against the New England Patriots. The wild card victory over the Jacksonville Jaguars, where the Bills get their first road victory of the season. And obviously, I mean, there were some good games along the way. The Bills lost too, but I don't think we're going to vote for any of those, including the game that ultimately ended their season. But Luke and I were aligned on this one too. The first game of the year, Bills and Ravens. And I'll give you my reasoning first before I kick it to you. I think you can make a really strong argument for Bills Patriots later in the year. But I think the fairest way to look at this is how you felt that day. Because ultimately, sitting here today, we're like, the Ravens didn't even make the playoffs. The Patriots are in the Super Bowl. We beat them on their own home field. I hear you. But that day, it felt like for 80% of that game, the Bills were playing the best team in maybe the entire sport. And then they managed to come back and steal the game. And it felt like the kind of game that was going to set them up for having home field advantage, having the number one seed, and really putting a lot of pressure on the Ravens to get this Bills monkey off of their back. And while I felt good about how the Bills came back and beat the Patriots, I think it was somewhat equally alarming how slow they started in that game. And that it was a December game, if I'm correct in that, or a late season game against the Patriots, where when you have a slow start like that in a spot like that, I think I was almost more concerned about why is this team not buttoned up now? It's not week one anymore. It's we're coming up on crunch time. And even though they did come back and win the game and it was an exciting ride, I left the Ravens game. I couldn't get enough of the highlights. After the Patriots game, I was like, whew, on to the next one. So that's why I voted. What was your reasoning, Luca?
Yeah, the 3 games in total are Ravens, Patriots on the road late in the season, and then I do think the Bengals are in there. I believe both, like you mentioned, the Patriots one was in December. Bengals was also, I believe, the first week of December. The Ravens one to me, though, is absolutely the takeaway winner of this. It almost, looking back on it now and reflecting, truly did speak to how this season was going to play out, in the sense of how the game to game experience was going to be, in the sense of we were not going to see the Bills really ever come out and put their foot on the throat of anyone. And even a lot more times than not, sadly, see them kind of maybe walk out onto the field early on and then find themselves chasing the game a little bit. And then hopefully for them, and it did feel like it happened more times than not, but there were still times they came up short, they were going to come out on top. Why the Ravens one was special, though, is because, as you mentioned, the implications of what it felt like that game's impact could have been like later on in the season when it came to playoff seeding, matchups, whatever it is. And going into the year, the message around the league circles and whatnot was the Ravens felt like they had one of the best rosters in the game. And you're going in there, or they're coming to you and playing what felt like the biggest game over, or one of the biggest games of the season, right out the gate. And there's Derrick Henry just smashing you in the mouth drive after drive. Lamar Jackson slipping through Joey Bosa, not being able to contain for the life of him. And it just felt like for 2/3 of it, 3/4 of it, the game was over. And yet then all of a sudden, Ed Oliver makes an incredible play himself, punches a ball out, gets a fumble recovery. We score, turn around, get it, force a punt, score again. Things like that. All the game flipped on its head. Josh Allen took over, was Superman, and we win this game. And you're elevated to a place as a fan that feels like the impossible is possible. And that game was probably that one also set up the ultimate mindset, at least for me as a fan in this season, and maybe even going forward, where the thought was in my brain as friends were over to watch that game, where I was like, if this drive doesn't go well in my head, I was like, I'll just say they can go if they want, it's whatever. And that was truly the moments where it felt like it flipped a little bit. And you need to appreciate the 60 minutes of football for what it is, because anything truly can happen. It just takes one or two things to go your way, even as late as it could be, to then all of a sudden get yourself back into it and maybe even squeak out the win like the Bills did in that game. So it absolutely laid the foundation for kind of both the highs and the lows that were to come for the season, that I think it just takes the cake when it comes to being a phenomenal game in a vacuum, while also just forecasting what it felt like it was going to be, or now realizing what it was going to be for the remainder of the season, that you were never going to see a consistent baseline team in any game. You were going to get your ups and downs all the way through the 17 game season and even into the playoffs. So it encapsulates what this season truly was, and at least finished on a high note then, whereas obviously the season did not finish in the way that we all hoped it would. but it was a special game. It felt like in the moment that it deserves to be called the game of the year when it comes to the Bills schedule.
I agree, and I think when you think about this being the last season at Highmark, it really was a fun slate of games at Highmark. You talked about the Bengals game, the Ravens game, the first Patriots game was a knockdown drag out. The Bills ultimately lost. The Eagles game, same thing,
Yeah.
defensive battle. The Bills ultimately lose. The Bucks game was a lot of fun. The Dolphins game on Thursday Night Football, a little too close for comfort. The Bucks game was a wild shootout. The Chiefs game is always fun. So if you were a home fan that had season tickets to this game, you got your money's worth at Highmark. And then even the last game against the Jets just felt like one big Highmark celebration with the old school unis and the Bills just dominating. And it was kind of a kickback and enjoy the moment kind of day. All right, Luca, that is it on the ones we agree on.
Yeah.
Although, no, I take it back. We agree on game ball. But
Yes.
we'll save that for the end.
Yeah.
All right. Rookie of the year. This rookie class, a lot of expectations, a lot of controversy on WGR the next day, a lot of defense, but ultimately, Max Harrison, the first round pick, and Deion Walker, the fourth round pick, earned Pro Football Writers all rookie nominations.
Mm-hmm.
And that's especially impressive for Harrison, who it felt like he missed about half the season. TJ Sanders had injuries getting his way. It did feel like as the season went on, he was starting to come along. Jackson Hawes was everything he was described to be and more as a blocking tight end. And then from there, you had Dorian Strong's unfortunate situation. And then Jordan Hancock, who was, a valuable depth piece for this team. All right. Do you want to go first?
I will go first if you want.
Go
Yeah,
for it.
sure. So I think there are two candidates truly that stand out here because, in my opinion, as great as Max Harrison showed he can be for this team, he just wasn't available enough.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is a massive proponent to why you could not be truly named the rookie of the season or rookie of the year for the Bills. So there really are only two guys to me. One of them most certainly is not Landon Jackson, but who I believe deserves this might not be the normal. But I think when you have a certain side of your team be the number one in the league when it comes to what they accomplished, that being the ground game. And this rookie came in and really elevated that part of the game and became, I've never heard a rookie talk so highly about right out the gate than especially one drafted on day 3, such as him. I mean, Jackson Hawes changed the way the Bills viewed the tight end room, it feels like, and what they could do with the tight ends and how they could go 13 personnel and feel like Jackson Hawes actually gives them that big O-line situation because of what you're able to do and the versatility you can provide, while then also, oh, spoiler alert, this blocking guy, maybe he can catch the ball once in a while when Josh Allen finds him, and he can be worked downfield and do things the way that he can, which was just like a cherry on top reward for being a tight end, a true tight end. It's not Alec Anderson out there leaking down the field a little bit and then maybe hitting him in the hands. It's like, no, this is a guy who actually is a true tight end. He's just a big bodied one that is what appears to be an incredibly elite blocking one. So right out the gate, the NFL wasn't too much for him. He comes in and he absolutely transcends the run game for this team that, in my opinion, you don't have the number one rusher in the NFL without a Jackson Hawes. I think he was that important. It's a collective thing. That's why you see running backs, of course, talk about their offensive lines and how much they credit them and things like that. There's a funny clip out there, if anyone's an NFL fan and stuff, of CJ2K saying if he got to 2,000 yards, he'd buy all of his offensive linemen a car, and he never did such. It's just funny, and he jokes around about it now. But the offensive line is important. But if there's the next man up kind of situation, and what was integral to allowing James Cook to effectively run the ball in the fashion that he was, it's very, very hard to look elsewhere than Jackson Hawes as being such a key proponent to that. I mean, Jackson Hawes and you obviously have Reggie Gilliam, but we're talking rookie of the year here. You don't expect a day 3 rookie to come in and be as impactful on the regular for the most important part of your offense. It felt like all season long, but he really was that and he was available the entirety of the season. So Jackson Hawes, you're absolutely my rookie of the year.
He was a godsend to this offense, and it's very rare you can say this about a rookie, obviously barring injury, but what's the scenario where Jackson Hawes doesn't play 10 years in this league?
Yeah.
He just has a skill set that's going to translate, it's going to age well, and he gave us more in the receiving game that I think we anticipated. And no, he's never going to be confused with George Kittle, but to get anything out of him as a receiver, I think it makes it look like he should have gone quite a bit earlier in this draft. And you and I both know you take PFF grades with a grain of salt, but I have up here right now PFF offensive grades for tight end. Number 1 is George Kittle. Number 2 is, ironically, Dalton Kincaid. Number 3 is Colston Loveland. And the reason why I'm reading these off now, number 4 is Jackson Hawes.
Yeah.
And it wasn't for lack of snaps that got him up there. And when you look at run blocking and pass blocking, he's top 10 in both. So PFF is only one metric, but to Luka's point, he had the NFL rushing leader, and it became so much less predictable than having Alec Anderson out there, where you're never going to throw to that guy. And Jackson Hawes really put defenses in a bind. I like that pick a lot. I'm going to go with probably the easier answer. I'm going to go with Dayon Walker. Again, 2 smash day 3 picks by Brandon Beane. A lot of us came into this season thinking that maybe Dorian Strong would be the Christian Benford to the, Kyer Elam that was Max Harrison. But in a lot of ways, it ended up being Dayon Walker, who was the Kyle Williams to the TJ Sanders, John McCargo. Now, I still have a lot of belief in TJ Sanders. He has a very unique skill set, and I do think that this switch to the Jim Leonhard scheme is going to be very good for him. But Dayon Walker, Luka, led all defensive linemen for the Bills in snaps. And my favorite thing about Dayon Walker was he never hit the rookie wall. And this is a guy that came in with an injury flag. If it wasn't for the injury flag, he would have been a first or second round pick. And he never hit the rookie wall. He was their most consistent defensive lineman from start to finish. And I am including Rousseau and Bosa in that. And he had a game-changing play in Denver where, yes, you could say Bo Nix threw the ball right to him, but you saw Dayon Walker have ball awareness while rushing the passer a lot this season, knocking the ball down. I'm not sure whether he's going to be a defensive end or a nose tackle, probably both in the Jim Leonhard scheme going forward, but I'm absolutely positive that barring injury, he is a key cog in this defense going forward. And Brandon Beane, who's taken a lot of heat for his, lack of smash hits in the first round, I mean, take a bow for what you did on day 3 of this draft, because where would this team be without Dayon Walker and Jackson Hawes, 2 absolute home runs? All right, let's go to Unsung Hero. And Luka, I'll go first on this one. I think there is so many names we could get to. Tyrell Shavers, a guy that had to struggle just to make the practice squad a couple years ago, comes in and is the best run blocking wide receiver they have by a lot, to the point where he gets injured in the Jacksonville game, and you're thinking, oh no, that's going to really hurt our running game. Same thing with Dorian Williams. He gets injured the first play of that Broncos game, and you're thinking, oh no, there goes our pass rush package. He never turned into a full-time linebacker, but really a good blitzer. We've talked about Poyer. We've talked about White. I mean, your guy, Matt Prater, you couldn't say enough about him, but
yeah.
I'm going to go, I really wanted to go Jordan Poyer here because of the impact he had on Cole Bishop, the stability he provided when it was clear that something was seriously wrong with Taylor Rapp, and the fact that it went so poorly in Miami and it looked so bad at the end of his last Bills run that it was just hard to have any expectations, and he came in and really solidified the position, and he's one of my favorite Bills ever, right up there with Eric Moulds, right behind Josh Allen is number 1. That's where Jordan Poyer is in my heart. But I can't ignore the fact, Luka, that I think there was one more unsung hero, that was more valuable, and that's Shaq Thompson. Shaq Thompson was a guy that was an eye roll when they signed him. Like, there they go, back to the Carolina pipeline. I haven't heard this guy's name in 5 years. Oh, Luke Kuechly's running mate, who's now a Hall of Famer. And Shaq Thompson, you heard reports in camp and your eye roll and like, okay, camp, I get it. Shaq Thompson looks good in camp. And then week 1 happens, and the Bills linebackers look absolutely lost against the run. To Terrell Bernard's credit, I think cover 1 had this before anybody. He looked very, very injured this season. He was going at about 60 to 70% speed. I am hopeful that if he can get right, Terrell Bernard will be back to being a decently good linebacker. But the reality of Terrell Bernard in 2025 was he was an absolute weakness on this team. Matt Milano, until about halfway through the season, was an absolute weakness on this team, and he just woke up one day and decided he was going to hit the fountain of youth and become an all-pro again, and that was beautiful to see. But Shaq Lawson stabilized that position. He seemed to be one of the only players in that entire run linebacker room that prioritized stopping the run. When Terrell Bernard goes out, you're not just losing your middle linebacker, you're losing a team captain, you're losing the guy that calls the plays in the huddle and does the checks, and Shaq Thompson took over all of that. He was the star of the show in Jacksonville, right up there with Cole Bishop. Started the game off with an interception, had some big tackles in open space. I don't know if he'll be back next year. I don't know if he's a scheme fit. I saw him on Twitter say that he can play in a 3-4 or a 4-3. I'd love to have him back as a stopgap. But man, Shaq Thompson, worth every penny and more. Would hate to see where this team would be without Shaq Thompson in 2025.
That the key to this, especially with Shaq Thompson, is where would this defense have been if he was not available to this roster? That is what really brings him over the top. And what makes that as the unsung hero for you absolutely full-heartedly credible and whatnot. It's in that light that I will say that's exactly why I go where I went with my unsung hero. And you mentioned Tyrell Shavers, for instance, and how great he was for the run blocking at the perimeter and just in the run game in general at the receiver position. And just the receiver group as a whole was, of course, just the highlight or low light of the entire season. And when you look back, if you were to listen back to some of the things we talked about, they go out there and I feel like it was a waiver claim. I don't think it was a cut and sign. I just can't remember exactly what took place to have this individual eventually land on the Bills roster. But where this receiver core even looked when he first arrived to then where it was as you entered the playoffs and then in those playoff games, my unsung hero is Brandon Cooks. And Brandon Cooks as my unsung hero is truly almost in a way of me, stuffing my foot in my mouth, because early on it's documented out there in the space. We're not deleting our words here. I absolutely wanted to see him gone. I believe it was after the Patriots road game because he opened up with that terrible drop. It might have been that one or even after that. He had this whole thing where he was just essentially dropping the one deep target he had, and it was just frustrating. But then eventually he's a pro's pro, clearly, and he got his reps in with Allen enough where you could tell it started clicking and he was making those catches. And then the Philly game happens where he's an absolute key proponent of any ability to move the ball. And the Jags play, and I can just feel like I can say that, and anyone knows what play that is, the play that essentially has the Bills in position to seal the deal on the offensive side of the ball. It's Brandon Cooks. That's the target downfield that makes the play happen. And then whether you like it or not, the image of this season, we'll get into headline later in the episode, but the image of the season truly will be of Brandon Cooks on the field being called upon in that moment, 3rd and long in Denver to make a play. And Josh Allen hits him in the hands. And for a second, you feel like he makes that catch. I don't know if that's even possible if Brandon Cooks is not on this roster. I have no clue who the other person could be on this roster that could even be in that position to make that play. That's the point of this. The unsung hero being Brandon Cooks is, if you did not have him on the roster available to you, and he kind of feels like lost money in the couch kind of deal, like where would you have been with, especially in Denver when you were without Gabe Davis and Tyrell Shavers at that moment, assuming that the same thing would have happened? Where would you have been if Mecole Hardman was the guy asked to do that? Like, I don't even think that remotely comes close to being caught. There's there's so much that's like, if it wasn't for Brandon Cooks, how awful could this receiver core truly have looked down the stretch and in the playoffs? I'm glad we don't have to know, but I also wish we were never in a position where he was needed in the first place. That's what makes Brandon Cooks, to me, just an absolute perfect candidate to be an unsung hero and be alongside a Shaq Thompson of, if these two people did not exist on the 2025 Bills, holy crap, would shit have looked way worse overall. And we probably don't even get to the point where it feels like we're disappointed we didn't get the result in the divisional round and felt like we absolutely were capable, even with a poor Josh Allen performance, of getting over the line and getting into another conference championship game. Cooks and Thompson, for what it's worth, are big pieces of that equation there.
Yeah, I like that pick a lot. Cooks was just a professional receiver, and he's not the high end, high caliber, borderline number one receiver he was early in his career. But we talked about it when they signed him. There's so many opportunities in this Bills offense with the defenses you face to get open one on one with the coverages you face. And we saw the Bills try it with Palmer. We saw him try it over and over and over with Keon Coleman. And then Brandon Cooks comes in and early on dropped a couple balls where he was open. But the biggest thing, it was like he was open. Oh, did you guys see that? He was open like that. That's new. And if he catches that ball, who knows where that season goes? But I'm with you. It's kind of a chicken and egg thing with Bean and McDermott. And the receiver group is one Bean has to wear. But man, there were some holes on this roster that got filled with not a lot of assets. When you talk about Thompson and Cooks and guys like that, do you give credit to the coaching staff for getting the most out of those players? Do you give credit to the talent scouts for finding those players? I don't know the answer to that, but I think if you have your mind made up that it was all Bean's fault or all McDermott's fault, I would beg you to see that these guys are both probably pretty good at their job. You don't have this run of consistency without being good at your job. I think Brandon Bean has a very forgettable moment on WGR, and yeah, he's had some clunkers in the first round, but ultimately there's a reason why this roster continues to compete, and I would give him some credit for that Brandon Cooks pickup. All right, well, we are down to two more awards, Luka, and it's the ones that are our favorite segment of the week: Game Ball and Game Check. Let's go Game Ball. Game Ball for the year. And for those of you that aren't aware, first of all, how dare you not be aware? But if you listen to us during the year, we do not include Josh Allen in this. Honestly, I don't know if Josh Allen would have gotten my vote if we do include him, but it got to a point last year where it felt like we could have given the game ball to Josh Allen every week. Yep. One caveat we're making for this end of season award: we are allowing ourselves to be duplicative. In the regular season, if Tyrell Shavers gets my game ball, Luka can't go with Tyrell Shavers, or vice versa. We try to call out two different players just so we can tell more of a story of the game. This is not the case. And you're going to see this with Game Ball. We both have the same player. So Luka, would you like to announce who gets the Bills Chat 2025 Game Ball Award?
I think all in all, as you said, it even is open, if we wanted to, for Josh Allen just for an overall season, but it doesn't feel like this is the kind of year that Josh Allen truly is the game ball of the year. And there was only one individual or just a part of this team that was consistent, reliable, and something you could absolutely lean on in any game format to get results and get the wins more so than not when you needed it. And even in losses such as like the Denver game where the season closes out, it wasn't due to a failure of, well, outside of one play, of this individual that you always wanted this individual to have the ball if it wasn't Josh Allen. That's the end of the day. That's exactly where you were when it came to this team. And the game ball goes to James Cook. You lead the league in rushing. You are absolutely putting yourself in the conversation of being one of the best backs in the league, something that your brother was, and you're doing it in a fashion where if you're not Josh Allen on the Bills, who's the next most threatening player on this team, it's James Cook. I mean, and anyone is going to game plan for the Bills now moving forward when they double circle 17, but then they double circle 4. and be like, hey, the two guys who are going to be standing in the backfield probably 80% of the time or whatever the ratio becomes, they're both a problem. They are both a big, big problem. And, credit to the offensive line to still be as effective as they have been. I talked about Jackson Hawes earlier being what it felt like transcendent in the run game and allowing it to be less predictable, which is what I'm sure in turn helped open up run fits a little bit more. But James Cook also ran this year in a way that I don't think you and I expected he was capable of. There was a level of patience and understanding of where the holes are, when to wait for him, when to cut back, whatever it was. He was seeing the field very, very well to a level that was a little bit surprising. And then just the silky smooth nature with also the explosiveness. James Cook elevated himself even more so that it's just, he's absolutely, in my opinion, we talk about all the time, the top 10 players on the team, the most important players on the team. He is bona fide, solidified, concrete number 2 on this roster. It is Josh Allen, and then it is James Cook. And, just to cap it all off, just because I think it's appropriate time, was having a fun conversation with a friend yesterday before the Sabres game where we talked about, trading for Justin Jefferson would be fun. What would the trade look like? This and that. And he's like, what wouldn't you trade for Justin Jefferson? And I know you and I have even had the conversation. And I said, if a first involved, I don't even know if I want to trade James Cook. It just feels like too much. I'm not saying I literally wouldn't, but it's just James Cook has gotten to that point where it's like, man, he is so valuable to this team and this run game just because of how dynamic he is that you don't want to, in that figurative imaginary world, that feels like I'd rather do 2 first-round picks rather than a first and James Cook. And it's amazing how we've come that far when it comes to the running back position and James Cook specifically, to put him at that next tier up where he is with the big boys now, it feels like, after this past season. So for game ball, to me and you and I, it is unequivocally James Cook. There is no other answer to this game ball award.
I think a lot of times with running backs, it's easy to kind of poo-poo it and say, well, anybody could run behind that offensive line. I don't know if that's the case anymore, because even early in the year, it felt like a give-up play when they would give Ray Davis or Ty Johnson a carry, and James Cook was still busting out 200-yard games against the Carolina Panthers. And I know he had that forgettable moment against Denver, but don't let it be lost that in the last 2 games that the Bills were eliminated, the Chiefs AFC Championship game, he was the best player on the field. That very memorable 4th down fight for the touchdown. He had 117 yards, averaging 4.9 yards per carry against Denver. And Luka, I still leave this season, even though he's the rushing leader, even though he finished with 1,621 yards on 309 carries, feeling like there's so much more meat on the bone in the receiving game for this guy. And I'm excited to see what continues to happen with his career. James Cook is our Game Ball Award winner for 2025. With the good, there's got to be some bad. Game check. And we differ on this one. I will go first. And my Game Check Award winner is Keon Coleman. And the way this season started, Luka, that Ravens game, Keon Coleman had 8 receptions, 112 yards, a touchdown on the day. It felt like it was time. And we had heard all through camp, Keon Coleman was dominating DBs, and this connection with Josh Allen and Keon Coleman was going to set the league on fire. And Deion Dawkins was saying the league screwed up. He had all those stats. The rest of the way, 30 catches for 292 yards. Keon Coleman never became the guy the Bills envisioned when they took him with the 33rd pick in the draft 2 years ago. It got so bad off the field that he was benched for 4 games. Immaturity issues, but then ultimately it felt like it was less about maturity issues and more about the Bills, quite frankly, trusting guys like Shavers and Davis that they plucked off of their practice squad, and Mecole Hardman and Brandon Cooks that they got out of free agency, trusting them over Keon Coleman. And even in a day in Denver when they had to basically dust off Curtis Samuel after 2 months of being inactive and get Mecole Hardman off the street, back on this roster, ramped up to go. Those guys got more playing time than Keon Coleman. And I think ultimately when the owner calls you out in a press conference as, that's the smoking gun of who actually wanted this player, I never want to see somebody fail, but at this point in time, if Keon Coleman were to come back and be a productive player for the Buffalo Bills, I think it would be one of the all-time great comeback stories in sports because I think his reputation is buried right now. I know what Joe Brady said in his press conference. I respect that. I like where he's coming from. But if there was ever a player in need of a fresh start, it's Keon Coleman. And I hope the Bills do right by him and ship him off this offseason to give him a fresh start somewhere else. It's not working out here. And I think the presence of Keon Coleman, the idea that he can be this X, is actually log jamming and preventing them from going out and making a move that they need to move and getting a real X on this roster. So Keon Coleman, there's a lot that went wrong with this team, but every time I think about the most frustrating parts of the season, he's one of the first names that come to mind.
Yeah, it's a layup of layups. As obviously you highlighted, we did not agree on this, but it's not because I don't think Keon is absolutely deserving of it. Where my head goes with my game check of the year is it's kind of a same old song and dance situation. And I like how I tee these up a little bit here more, but I kind of want to talk through my thought process. So year after year, season after season, it always felt like it would end and we're sitting there because we lost to Mahomes or we lost to Burrow. And one of the number one things we talk about year after year after year is pass rush, is defensive line play, just not being not good enough to get to the quarterback. And this season, they, of course, did one thing to hopefully address that. And the defensive line got a huge recruitment through the draft and a bunch of young guys. But as we've talked about, Josh, you do not draft to then fix immediate needs. That is for filling the cupboard and addressing future concerns and needs of the roster. You attack immediate needs through free agency, through trades, through proven commodities that you have proven results and data that this individual is capable of doing whatever job you think it is they need to come in and do for you in the now. And what felt like the biggest signing, I'll call it that, but it's not like it was huge or anything. It was definitely, of course, the most noteworthy signing for the Bills was Joey Bosa. Joey Bosa comes to this roster, and then on top of it all, through the first 8 games of the season, has 4 sacks, looks like he's absolutely capable of being that one edge guy that you need that can effectively rush the passer, disrupt play, even in games where I believe he did not record a sack, which I know he didn't in the New England game. He was making his presence known. He was getting to Drake May. Drake May was just, unfortunately for us, making the plays in crunch time when he needed to, mainly the one Diggs deep crosser, or maybe it was like a flag route, whatever it was, along the sideline. Bosa was right there in his face. Like, Bosa can only do so much. He's doing his job. Everything's going great. And then all of a sudden, we hit the double-digit weeks, and the guy falls off a shelf. The only sack Joey Bosa recorded from week 9 against Kansas City on, so week 9, I'm not including in this, so we'll call it week 10, the loss against Miami and on, was, ironically enough, the Pittsburgh game where he strip sacks, fumbles Aaron Rodgers and essentially seals that game. So he has one noteworthy moment in that stretch from week 10 all the way through the end of the season against Denver. And we sat there wondering why the hell it felt like Bo Nix is not getting pressure nearly enough. And your ace in the hole, I'll use air quotes here, Joey Bosa, is as incapable to rush the passer as it was like Mario Addison back in the day. Like, it is just, Joey Bosa is just one of the guys out there playing defensive line, doing absolutely nothing when it comes to being effective at getting to the passer. And the image and video of him slamming his helmet against the wall and being frustrated and dealing with another losing season, even though he got that fresh start or, new environment away from the Chargers. And he early on felt like something was different. And you could tell that even in his monotone ways that it felt good to be doing this. He encapsulizes what feels like is a perfect kind of description as to a main proponent of issues of never getting over that line in the entirety of the McDermott era. And the biggest name, I mean, Von Miller is definitely in there. And Von Miller was one that I'll put a little bit of an asterisk on, only because his felt like it fell off a shelf due to injury, of course, not due to just, I don't know, incapable of playing into the deep parts of the season. Um, Joey Bosa being the signing that he was and just falling off a shelf, as experienced as he is, and he was banged up, but it's not like he was incapable of playing games like we've seen in years past. He was available for every single game. He was registering box scores every single game. He just wasn't effective enough. He wasn't capable enough. He wasn't that premier edge pass rusher that you wanted and expected him to be. And it was just yet another season of having an edge that you brought in for one thing and one thing only, fully incapable of doing their job in the moment when you need them to. So I understand the Keon Coleman stuff, and I talked about receiver my own right with the unsung hero aspect of everything. But holy shit, when you're Joey Bosa and you are expected to do one thing, and you even show you are capable of it early on, and then just absolutely disappear and fall off the face of the earth, I just don't know how I look anywhere else, because it's the same old song and dance that this season ends with. And the one of the biggest questions are, how the hell are we not getting to the quarterback? And you have a guy of the stature of Joey Bosa. It's an unacceptable thing. So my game check award goes to Joey Bosa. And it just, it's incredible to me how halfway through the season I'm thinking, holy crap, maybe we can even get this guy on the cheap for a couple more years, and maybe we have a good pass rusher. And if I see this guy in a Bills uniform moving forward, I'm going to be heavily disappointed in what we're trying to do and achieve. Nor do I think he fits what we're probably going to be trying to do moving forward anyways. But it's just, what an absolute down, slam down to earth disappointment that Bosa was, considering the way he kind of started the season and where it ended up.
Yeah, it's a good call. I remember when the Bills signed Bosa, we joked about just put him in bubble wrap. If he has a cold that week, let him take the rest of the month off and just get into the playoffs healthy. And he was in the playoffs healthy, and it wasn't hard to notice that a lot of times teams would just run right at him. You were on it early in the season. Like, did you notice who they're running at? They're running at Joey Bosa, and he's not doing anything to get in the way. Just looked like a guy that was trying to get as many sacks as possible heading into free agency, instead of somebody, even in January, even in Jacksonville. Like, these are the money games, and you're worried about sacking the quarterback when ETN's ripping off 8 yards a carry. Very disappointing. All right, Luca, well, we've made it. The narrative of the season, the headline of the season. When we look back on this season, so many ups and downs. Ultimately, the season that led to Sean McDermott being fired and massive change coming at One Bills Drive. How will you remember this season? What would be your headline or quote or terminology you use to describe it?
So I've had to think about it during this episode. I even told Josh I'm going to have to just on the fly think about it as we're discussing all these awards and stuff. And I will say, I flirted with the idea of doing something about the Brandon Cooks catch, or not so much catch, in Mile High, something about Mile High ending in Denver, all of these things. And I think that doesn't do justice to the season, because when this season came and went, and we sit here now in February and look back and reflect at the season and truly kind of understand what will be remembered about this season, is that the process was terminated. Process terminated. It's over. It's done. And obviously, what I'm referring to with that, and what I will always remember it to be, just like my point about how season after season pass rush and defense was never good enough in crunch time, and we talked about other things. It was, those are the key things through all of the years. But then last season, once again, when it was finally concluded that a McDermott team just wasn't capable of getting over the hump, and because of that, the process that is Sean McDermott was terminated. So I don't see any other way to describe this season than process terminated, or, end of process, or whatever. This is the end of process season. This is the end of everything. And I mean, you can even, trickle down that to, it's the end of an era at Highmark. It's the end of so many things. I will say, I think the reason there's almost this casualness I have about where I sit and stand as a Bills fan right now, looking ahead, is the new stadium, new coach, everything like that. It's a true bookend, it feels like, to so many years of being a Bills fan, and the progression of, just from my age, pre-drought, drought, and then post-drought, of course, being the Josh Allen McDermott era, doing it all at the same time in the fashion that they, whether coincidentally or not, have done. It feels almost like terminating that process, ending the process now, is what feels like the best way to then move forward, and try to get over that hump and do something differently, even though it didn't feel like, we talked about our frustration with Joe Brady being hired initially, but maybe just because of the timing of it all, it does kind of have this vibe to it that we are going into a whole new class of being a Bills fan, and time and era for everything going on. That looking back, this season will truly just be that bookend to everything. And so the 25 season, to me, the headline as it all is just process terminated.
This very much is the Josh Allen era, but in a lot of ways, the end of the 25 season feels like the end of an era because of how much McDermott meant to this team. I like that process terminated. And, you know, right, wrong, or indifferent, to me, it felt like McDermott did a bang up job in these playoffs.
Mhm.
But again, like the little things continue just to bite him in the butt. I didn't love, the more I think about it, I didn't love the way he handled the end of the Jacksonville game. He got away with it, but it felt like he left, he did something. What made the Patriots great? Tom Brady, yes, we get that. Belichick didn't give you an inch in these playoff games. He was buttoned up everywhere. And you see that with Vrabel. And McDermott gave the Jags life by scoring so quickly. And they got away with it. The team at the end of that Broncos first half looked like a team that just needed to get to the locker room. They were starting to come unraveled. And you have, for my money, the most competitive quarterback in the sport. They're all competitors, but maybe even to a fault. No matter what the situation is, I'm going to make a play, Josh Allen, and you put him in a situation with 13 seconds left and no timeouts. And what are we trying to accomplish? Well, we saw the worst case scenario. McDermott shouldn't have put his team in that situation. Josh Allen has to wear that. But I think there were just enough little gaps in McDermott's plan that we're going to lose sight of just how sound his defensive game plan was in both of those games. And I really felt like he was in his bag and the coaching staff was in their bag. And it felt like if they'd been buttoned up on the little details, they could have done something special. But alas. I look at this season. There was a couple ways I wanted to go with this. I thought about the definition of insanity because, that is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. I thought about opportunity lost when you think about what was there available to them with Mahomes, Burrow, Jackson all having down years, and the easy schedule, and then just watching a team that you weren't really thinking about in that light just take advantage of it right next to you in the division and really having the season that we all envisioned our team having. But I feel like calling it opportunity lost, not opportunity lost, calling it snake bit was like letting the Bills off the hook too much, because I do think these were a lot of self-inflicted wounds. So I'm ultimately going to land on this season is opportunity lost. And the the easiest way to spin it is it was on a silver platter, Bills. The schedule, we could see it coming in April, a mile away. Your hardest games are at Highmark. You play well at Highmark. Easy schedule. You beat the Ravens week 1, and then there was a point early in the year we're talking about, can this team go undefeated? And we all saw the deficiencies in this roster, but holy cow. Some people talk about this team like it's the Little Giants and Josh Allen is Icebox, if you're old enough to know that reference. But like this team has some talent on it. And I don't think that anybody walks away from that Denver game thinking that Josh Allen put this team on his back like a backpack and carried them. I think the Bills were every bit as talented, if not more, than the Broncos in that game and should have won. But whether it is beating the Chiefs at home and then the next week going to Miami and getting blown out by a Dolphins team that had just fired their general manager and traded away their best defensive player and started waving the white flag. The way you lost in Houston and Atlanta, the first Patriots game. How many times, and I know they haven't lost a lot of home games, but how many times we got to watch this Bills team just have a clunker in the regular season where they give a game away? And that Patriots game, the Bills were the better team that day. They gave that game away. And I know the Patriots can say the same thing happened later in the year, and I would listen to that they kind of gave that game away. But um, when you look at how this season ultimately ended, though, a playoff bracket without Mahomes, without Burrow, without Jackson, starting it off with what unbiased people said was the toughest challenge in the AFC in Jacksonville, and the Bills get that win. And then you go to Denver and turn the ball over 5 times. Really dumb turnovers. The fumble before half that led to 3 points was so unnecessary. Deion Dawkins just whiffing on a block to open up the second half. Again, unnecessary. The James Cook fumble, unfortunate, unnecessary, but it is what it is. That felt like, I mean, if the Bills had scored in that drive, I really believe, Luka, that the Bills were about to outclass this team and really just put them in their place. The Josh Allen, everyone wants to talk about the Brandon Cooks miss, but who was he? Was it to Samuel where he goes deep?
Right before, or yeah, it was Samuel was open and he underthrew it. Yeah,
after the Deion Walker interception.
Yes.
Throws it
to Curtis Samuel's open and he undershoots him. Yeah,
undershoots him by 10 yards. You're Josh Allen. You can throw it over the mountain, but for whatever reason on these deep balls, you leave them short way too often. And that could have been 7 points. And so Josh Allen is one of the only players in the sport capable of bringing his team back in a game that he dug that big of a hole.
Yeah.
And that sounds like I'm being a typical Bills fan making excuses for Josh Allen, but I hope you hear out there, I know you hear it, but I hope you listening out there hear me giving him accountability for that. I saw the tears after the game. I saw the pain in his voice. It breaks my heart as a Bills fan and as a freaking Josh Allen fan. I want to see this team win a Super Bowl. I want to see this dude win a Super Bowl. I think he's awesome for the sport. He's awesome for the city. I want to see him get his moment. But this was, in a lot of ways, his fault. But every time that it felt like the NFL was giving the Bills a gift, they gave it right back. The Chiefs are having a down year. Okay, well, we're going to give a game away to the Patriots, or we're going to lose a game in Miami, or the Broncos really can't stop us, but we're going to just do enough on defense. And then, I don't even want to get into that because it's so frustrating. But like Dane Jackson comes in for one play and you don't give him help over the top. Darnell Savage comes in instead of Jordan Hancock because he had a bad first game of the playoffs. You don't give him help. Just little things. McDermott. So self-inflicted wounds. Maybe that's what I want to go with. But opportunity lost is my title for the season, Luka.
Yeah, no, that's valid. That's all good. I mean, it's all in the same light, right? And this season truly is one where you can say it's an opportunity lost because of external factors, but it really is internally focused as well. I mean, it's just I don't know if we talked about it on the pod and recorded it, and people could go back and listen if they really wanted to let me know. But I remember at least having a discussion with you and others and felt like this truly was the aftershock wave and feel to what happened to this roster 2 off seasons ago. We were then dealing with the issues of it all. And it was supposed to be last season that we dealt with all of that. But they did enough to get by last season with a couple guys who elevated their game way more than they expected. And then they thought they could play with that house money and do it again. with even lesser. And it's like, no, I mean, Mac Hollins somehow got you by. Let's not try to duplicate that and try to do it through, a Palmer signing and think that you're still going to get by with that, if not elevate a little bit. It's like, no, Mac Hollins is just this weird one of one, man. Like, you're not going to get away with it. And you see what's happening in New England with him being, the guy who is only capable of the only one capable of making a big play against Denver in the AFC Championship, on a trick play, mind you. It's definitely a season where, yes, I think I like that both of our headlines, just to wrap it up, both of our headlines are truly focused on what this season was about. And as great of a job as McDermott did with kind of what he was dealt with, at the end of the day, it's McDermott himself who unfortunately just makes those little decisions that cost you in the end that aren't capable of getting you over the hump. And it's those little details not being focused on that are costing you big things into what your expectations and goals are in getting to the Super Bowl. So he's not the reason for the loss in Denver. He's not even the primary reason. We talked about it. It truly is 17 is the primary reason that they lost that game in Denver, but it's also 17 that's capable of getting you back in it. And when you need another guy to step up and understand the details of the game and the intricacies of everything, McDermott's not quite that individual who was capable of taking a game by the haunches and just understanding when to settle it down and focus on all the aspects of everything and just make sure that stuff gets over the line appropriately and gets done correctly. Darnell Savage, you might like him and stuff like that. That's a bold call to be putting him in cold in any situation. Stuff like that, just because you're upset with a rookie who, like you said, didn't have a great showing in the previous week. So, yeah, it's one where it's disappointing to not be moving forward with McDermott just because of what he's meant. But at the same time, it's absolutely fitting as to why we've moved on from him at this point, now that you can reflect back on the season.
And it's tough to swallow because that would have been the first time, all due respect to Skylar Thompson and the Miami Dolphins, it would have been the first time that a Josh Allen playoff team would have lifted him up and protected him from himself and carried him to the finish line after he has a day where he turns the ball over 3, and then if the Cooks thing still happens 4 times, to still beat a number 1 seed. And boy, that could have been such a galvanizing moment, and who knows where that team would have gone. But all it is unfortunately, like so many other chapters in Bills history, Luka, it goes down as a what if. But one thing you don't have to say what if about: what if this podcast returns? It will return. And then next week, we're going to start turning our attention to the 2026 season. We are officially putting a bow on the 2025 season. The Bills do not get it done. They have a new head coach. They're going to need some new players. And that is where Luka and I will start turning our attention to. For Luka, I am Josh McCarty. We will talk to you next time on Bills Chat.